So welcome everyone. My name's Jane and I work for SEEE, and this is our first webinar for our week of webinars this week. So a warm welcome to you all. Just to explain a little briefly about SEEE, if you don't know that much about us, if you're a social enterprise of any type, you can join us, and we have a dual membership with SEEE UK. So you get both memberships if you join us. And if your turnover is under 100,000, the membership is free. So it's a really good thing to join. And it means you can get latest news and event news, funding alerts, that sort of thing from us. So just drop me a line if you'd like more information afterwards. If you can keep yourselves on mute until towards the end when Danielle will open up for any questions or discussion, or you can, if you've got a burning question, you can put it in the chat. If you don't want to forget it, put it in the chat so we can come back to it later. We are recording this webinar as well, and we're going to put it on our website after the event. So you can, if you need to dash off, don't worry, you'll be able to catch up on the rest of it. I'm just going to admit a couple of people who come in. So welcome to the people just joining us, and we're just getting ready to start. And if you can, yes, stay on mute, and then we'll have questions at the end. But I'd really like to welcome Danielle from ABC Life Support, who are a great local training provider, who I'm sure Danielle will explain, but not just mental health, physical first aid as well, and a great social enterprise. So I'm really looking forward to your talk today, Danielle. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely introduction. Hi, welcome. Hi. Thanks. So I'm Danielle Bridge. I'm the Chief Exec of a company called ABC Life Support. So we deliver physical and mental health first aid training, strategy work across the UK. I'm also the chair of Cambridge Mental Health Network. So we look after a number of mental health services, support. We have CPFT as part of ours as well. So yeah, quite a lot of mental health services that I chair a networking group for as well. My mum is a mental health social worker who actually works in Hertfordshire, which is awesome. So it's nice to see Hertfordshire here. And yes, so yeah, it's nice to see you guys. And that's kind of a little bit of background in terms of what I do and why I do what I do. But my angle, I suppose, in the mental health space is about arming people, individuals and organisations with conversations on the front line, on the coalface. Because I think it's quite important to have that understanding that when we're talking about mental health, there tends to be this area that's here where clinicians live and reside and do work. And then you have mental health services where people with mental illness or mental ill health reside. And you have this other space, which I frequent, which is where other people, other organisations and individuals are trying to gain an understanding of this space, but don't quite know what to do. So that's kind of where I sit. And it's a very unique position because it's where I can arm people with the skills to be able to make a difference, to have those empowering conversations in the mental health space. I'm also an associate for Mental Health First Aid England. And that means I deliver mental health first aid specifically on behalf of that organisation out for larger clients across the UK. So that's a bit of my background. This webinar today is quite interactive, but we're going to use the chat function if that's okay. And you don't have to get involved. It's totally up to you if you wish to get involved or not. And I'm also going to be using some slides and a couple of videos. So let's get started because I know I've only got about 40 minutes with you. So I'm going to share my slides with you. And this slide is effectively to show you guys around having a holistic approach to mental health. So just like I said before, it normally resides in a space that people can't quite touch. And my job, I feel, is to bridge that gap. So my information is about talking about conversations around mental health that we should all be having, all of us. And so the first question is, how are you? And that is a question for you. So if you'd like to use the chat function, please feel free to do so. But how are you doing today? Anyone? Anyone want to say how they're feeling today? A bit damp and
Don't mind speaking if you want to help.
Is that, yeah, is that you, Karina? You're actually feeling a bit damp and thundery. So the weather is a bit damp and thundery. Feeling optimistic. Good.
I was going to say, Danielle, I'm feeling good today, but it's been quite a stressful weekend with my husband's quite anxious and we've had an ill guinea pig. So it's been a bit of a complex weekend.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing. Really well, having a good morning. Lovely. Thank you, Melanie. So the reason why I put this question up on every course I deliver is because you've heard this being asked. You've probably asked this yourself. You have been asked this question hundreds of times. But do we ever actually give the right answer? Do we ever actually give the answer that we feel that we should? So Natalie says that she's stressed, home working with a toddler. Ha ha, yeah, trying to survive at home with a toddler plus doing a bit of work is how I would call that. Well done for doing it. Totally stressful, I appreciate that. And the reason I ask is because actually that question's really loaded, right? It's a really loaded question and we are asked it so many times, but we often aren't given the opportunity to answer it very often. And in the mental health space, from a position of individuals, helping individuals, and this is where it starts. How are you? And then asking it again. How are you really doing? How are you today? And that's because the first time we are programmed to say, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, great. Yeah, absolutely fine. And that's sometimes what we do, right? And that's absolutely fine. We don't have to have these really in-depth conversations all the time, especially for people that we don't know, perhaps, all right? Although don't ever follow me in the petrol station, because if the guy or the woman behind the counter says to me, how are you today? They get the honest answer, which sometimes can take a bit of a long time. So I often tell people exactly how I'm feeling, because I think it's important to be open and have that open dialogue. So asking a question from the first point of call is when you get the opportunity to ask that question, make sure you have the time to ask it a second time. All right, I'm just going to leave it there for a moment. It's a very powerful question. Here are some stats that I want to talk to you about in regards to the mental health space that some of you may be aware of, but just take a couple of minutes to have a look at that, just like a couple, and I'm just going to pull out a few. So for me, mental ill health is responsible for 72 million working days lost and costs £34.9 billion each year. I can't even qualify how much money that is. I literally, that doesn't mean anything to me, it's too big a number, but I know it's a lot of cash. Presenteeism accounts for 2 times more losses than absences. Now, what that means is if you do not know what presenteeism is, I'm not teaching you to suck eggs because I'm looking at some of your jobs here who are like, wow, you probably know. This is when somebody goes to work and they mentally shouldn't be there. Now, I also know that that statistic can be extremely dangerous for people. For example, I do some work in the construction industry about getting men to talk about mental health, mental ill health. This is dangerous if you have somebody at work who mentally shouldn't be there. It could lead to death at work if you're not on your game. So it's dangerous. But if you have children or you have been a child yourself, you will appreciate that we are taught from a very young age that we push through it, we go to work. If you've ever been one of those people whose mum or dad said to you when you were younger and you wanted a day off of school, well, you don't look sick, off you go. This has left us with a legacy of having to prove our worth, prove our mental health challenges, prove that we need to be at home. And now, unfortunately, we have a generation of adults who go to work and they really shouldn't be there because you can't see it. I can walk, I can still use my hands, so therefore there can't be anything really wrong with me. And we know that not to be true. 69% of UK line managers say supporting employee wellbeing is a core skill, but only 13 have received mental health training. That statistic upsets me in a couple of ways. Number one is what the others are making up to 100% of the UK line managers that's saying that supporting their wellbeing is a core skill, but only 13 out of that have received mental health training. Bit of a concern. But on the right-hand side, it says these stats need to be taken with a pinch of salt. This is for those people who have disclosed that they have mental health challenges, and stigma prevents these numbers from being bigger. Any of those, and there's 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which out of those 5, and you can just put the number in the chat if you wish, but which one of those is more concerning for you? So at any given time, 1 in 6 working age adults have symptoms associated with mental health. Number 2, mental ill health is responsible for 72 million working days lost. 34.9 billion. Half of all mental ill health starts by age 15 and 75% develop by age 18. Presenteeism accounts for 2 times more losses than absences. And the final one, 69% of UK line managers say that supporting employee wellbeing is a core skill, but only 13% have received mental health challenges. So yes, personally as a parent, I'm worried about how early it starts. Yeah, it's quite concerning when you see a statistic like that. Number 10, yeah, number 2 again, yeah, we've got number 2 from Natalie, and from Lav says number 2. Melanie says 3, parental hat, number 3, right? And number 3, again, it's going to be your frame of reference, right? If we are parents to young children, I've got 2, a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, they're around that adolescent stage, things are starting to develop for them. I'm acutely aware of this statistic, so maybe looking at them more intensely than perhaps I should, but with this knowledge that I have, it is something that I am completely aware of. And Karina says yes, but also number 5, yeah, absolutely. So we know that these stats are quite scary, and we know that they are underestimations as well, right? So this is for people that have disclosed this stuff in one way, shape or another. Thank you. So what does the term mental health mean to you? We talk about it all the time. I'm not here to teach you such X, but we also appreciate that we talk about mental health quite a lot. I was doing a podcast this morning with a guest of mine, Lauren, who is a midwife, and we were talking about mental health postpartum and prenatally, and how it meant, you know, mental health can be affected. And one thing that comes out of it, we all have it, right? But what does it actually mean? The definition is this. So a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, they can cope with the normal stresses of life, they can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. If you are in a space where you are looking after perhaps service users who have profound mental illness or mental ill health challenges, then that is probably where your frame of reference sits. When I'm talking to everyone else, when we talk about mental health, they also talk about those people because they don't see themselves in that position because of the way in which mental health is spoken about. We all have mental health, and you cannot have health without mental health. And I had a psychologist on a training course a couple of weeks ago, and I asked her to contribute to the course. And she said that it comes from a time after the First World War, when men came back shell-shocked from the war and were told not to talk about it. Emotionally, we don't talk about things. After the Second World War, we expect people to come back with PTSD, etc. Again, it wasn't spoken about, and everything was done hush-hush. And as a result of that, it's separate, you know, made things separate. And we now live with this legacy of separating our mental health from our physical health, even in our hospitals. And you guys will know that, right? Me and my mum talk about that quite often. You have people who go to hospitals over there for mental health challenges, difficulties. You have people who go over there for physical health challenges, difficulties. But we know that those two things are interlocked. And yet we have 2 separate hospitals for the same body, but for different parts of it. We've got some work to do. And until we can kind of unify those things, I think we'll continue to have this separation of understanding around what mental health is. So the term mental health has a definition. This is the World Health Organization definition, and there are a number of them. So stress. What is stress? You've talked about stress. Everyone talks about stress. Coming into work, I'm really stressed out, got lots going on, and we can openly speak about stress because we've heard of that dialogue. It's open. Doesn't seem to be any stigma attached to it in terms of stress. And when I'm delivering training, we do an awful lot on stress. And stress is your body's reaction to a challenge or a demand. And some of those are physical. So we have late nights, binge drinking. I've got some environmental ones for you. So social isolation, and we know that throughout the pandemic, social isolation is and continues to be a huge situation for people that live alone, and that is causing people to have serious problems with their mental health. So we also have adjusting to new environments such as moving house, getting married, etc. Emotional, so relationship problems, high expressed opinions probably as well. Emotions within the family home can be quite stressful. And as a mother of 2 teenagers, I can also totally relate to that. We have other acute life events. So bereavements, again, people losing people through the pandemic. We understand what's causing massive, massive issues with other people, illness, pregnancies, etc. And then chronic, so long-term stress, accommodation problems, homelessness, etc., all cause stress. And on our training, we talk about the stress container. Has anyone ever seen the stress container? I don't want to show it to you if you've all seen it, but it is a great video. Has anybody seen the stress container video? Okay, no. No? Okay, let's have a look, because it's quite a cool video. We talk about this as a way of explaining to people, and actually if you have frontline opportunities with other people, it's a really good way of explaining what's going on for somebody. I'll talk a little bit about it afterwards, but I will share this with you now so you can all have a look. It's literally a minute long, so it's not too long. Here we go. Technology people. Here we go. Let me know if you can hear it.
What is stress? It's the physical and the mental changes we experience as a result of the demands placed on us in day-to-day life. So what does a bucket have to do with stress? The stress bucket represents our capacity to cope with stress, and the water level is the stress load. The more demands or stresses there are in our life, the higher the water level, and we feel stressed. Let's look at the different types of stress. There are the stressors that we choose, such as moving house, starting a new job, or going on holiday. And while mostly a source of joy and comfort, family, friends, and relationships can also place us under stress. Work stress is a common problem and can include workload, flexibility, and personal relationships in the workplace. And we all understand the financial demands of having a mortgage, bills to pay, and family to support. We can also get stressed from our environment, including what we see in the media, our neighbours, and even the weather. Plus, sometimes we hold attitudes and make lifestyle choices that add to our stress. And when the demands or stressors become too much, the bucket overflows and we can't cope. There are, however, ways to make sure your stress bucket doesn't overflow. You can reduce the amount of stress in your bucket by making choices, problem solving, or asking for support. And you can grow the size of your bucket by building your resilience and skills level in coping with stress. Remember, your thoughts, body, and feelings are all connected. So if you go for a walk or visit a friend, even when you don't really feel like it, you may end up feeling better able to manage. But be aware, some short-term fixes to stress really make it much harder in the long run. We all carry our own size of stress bucket. Some buckets are larger than others. But what matters is that you can carry your own bucket comfortably without spilling a drop.
So we often share that video on our training because I think it's quite useful for people to have a visual aid of what's going on in their heads. But what's also quite important from a stress point of view is that understanding of your stress container. Each and every one of us are a stress container, and each and every one of us have the capacity to have too much stress going on for us. Now, the irony is that you also have a situation where somebody's vulnerability, i.e. their stress container, is a hell of a lot smaller than somebody else's. And that is born out of a number of different factors. It could be genetics, it could be learning how to use coping mechanisms, it could be adverse life experiences. And that's why when somebody gets stressed about something, somebody else goes, well, I've done that and it's never caused me to get stressed out. That's because you're a completely different person, right? So we often talk about stress containers and utilizing people's lived experiences being completely different from our own and understanding that frame of reference. And I'm telling you what, right? The frame of reference is the most powerful model to understand. I do genuinely believe it's so powerful, it could be the key to world peace. Well, what I mean by that is if we all understood that somebody else has their own life with their own experiences and their own understanding, and it doesn't have to look like ours, and would give me empathy and understanding, right? But we don't have that. Unfortunately, we don't have it. But I do genuinely believe that if we could use that stuff, we totally should, right? Because it's a really, really powerful tool to have. So let's get back to our, if I can close that, let's get back to our slides. There we go. All right, so we often talk about stress, and it's important to understand people's stress containers are very different. All of us have one, but it's important for us to understand that everybody else's looks differently. And that's what we just watched in terms of the video. The next thing we're going to look at then is the continuum. And the reason, again, I talk about this as being a holistic conversation we should all be talking about is that so far I've shown you things that every single person has access to. Again, this is not a conversation about people who are unwell and me who is well. This is all of us having a conversation that unifies individuals across the board to understand that we all have mental health, and therefore our conversation should be inclusive. It's just popped up saying my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me? Is that okay? Wonderful. Good. Okay. So the continuum then, we're all on it. And I'm going to use the pandemic to help to describe what this might look like for some people. So this person, top right of what we classify the continuum, we have the maximum mental well-being and fitness at the top, and we have the minimum mental health and well-being at the bottom. Prior to this social model, this social construct, we only ever had the medicalized version, which was no diagnosis of illness and a severe diagnosis of mental illness. There was not really much in between. But we now know that not to be true. And there is a spectrum which all of us are on at all times in our lives, and that moves. So somebody with no mental illness or disorder has good and positive mental health. Man, that is the place to be. I wish that we could all sit up there comfortably most of the time, but that would not be life. Because actually, it's important to recognize that it's appropriate for people to have poor mental health. If we lost our job, we'd have poor mental health. If we had a bereavement, we had poor mental health. If something adverse has happened in our lives, which affects us, then we will have poor mental health. It's appropriate to have that reaction. The global pandemic, I believe, pushed an awful lot of people into this space. And some of us are still there, right? So nobody with no diagnosis of mental illness, but who has poor mental health and having behaviours around that. We also talk about the continuum using a way to describe crisis. And crisis happens in the bottom left hand of the continuum. So this is somebody with a diagnosis, who receive a diagnosis at that point of a serious mental illness, but who has poor mental health. And this is where people are detained under the Mental Health Act. This is where suicide takes place. This is where breakdowns of families take place. This is where an intervention is necessary. So this position here is a difficult position for us to be in, but also a difficult position to us to be able to support people in. And this is, like I said, where the action takes place. This is where something happens in terms of an intervention. This is where people can get help that they need, because often somebody might be in the bottom right hand of the continuum, but stay there for too long. And unfortunately, something happens where it's then taken out of their control. But the top left of the continuum is somebody with a diagnosis of a serious mental illness, but who copes well and has positive and good mental health. So you on this webinar, or if you're watching this webinar, that you're on there somewhere. We all are. It's personal, it's private, but we are all there. And what's really important is we can move from there. And there is always hope, which is probable, and likely, which is the top half of this continuum. So what's really important to understand when we're looking at this, I know it's a whistle-stop tour because we don't have too much time to go into detail, but what we do need to understand is that by having a diagnosis, it does not necessarily mean that somebody's mental health is poor right now. So somebody could receive a diagnosis of depression, but actually be living a really good life. Similarly, somebody might not have a diagnosis, but be really, really struggling at that moment. All right, so those two things are not synonymous with one another. All right, it's important to understand that if we're all on it, then this is a unifying model that helps us to have conversations with people who are struggling to say, do you know what, everybody is, you know, this is not just you, you know, there is help and support out there, and it's a difficult time right now. I can understand, I can empathise, whatever that may look like for you as an individual or a service. And actually, in terms of business, organisations, everyone is somewhere on the mental health spectrum. So there is a business productivity issue, which should be dealt with alongside other health and safety considerations. I mentioned stress earlier. Stress is listed under the Health and Safety Executive's risk response, and they even have a risk tool on their website if you're interested in going and have a look. But it sits under the Health and Safety at Work Act of 1974. It's there, it has been there since 1974, but it's coming into the forefront now after Thriving at Work review was published by Stevenson and Farmer. So creating a positive environment for mental health demonstrably costs less than failing to do so. And if it costs less than £34.9 billion, we're on to something. So therefore, taking an idea of doing mental health work awareness training within your company will categorically give you a return on investment. So it's important to understand that this stuff isn't just about having conversations for individuals, but organisationally as well, putting in opportunities to talk about it and to put in some practice does pay off in the end. So let's get back to that individual then we were talking about earlier on. And again, this is an understanding of how people may present when they are becoming unwell. So, and also that word that we like to use in terms of becoming unwell, there is no differentiator between mentally unwell or physically unwell. If somebody is unwell, then they're unwell. And I think if we can have that language, it stops that stigmatizing of the word mental, which we know that there is. All right. So again, just becoming unwell. You don't need to describe it all of the time. All right. Then let's take a look at here. So some of these are some signs and symptoms of a person that may be becoming unwell, and some of them might be really difficult for you as an outsider to see, but if that person is living this, then these are some of the behaviours that or feelings that they may be experiencing as a result of a decline in their mental health. So poor concentration, talking more, talking very fast, jumping between topics and ideas, a low mood, worrying more, sleeping more or less, feeling less interested in day-to-day activities, aggression, tearfulness. And in terms of tearfulness, if you work in an office, let me let you into a little secret. Mental health challenges take place in your toilets. That's not a question, by the way. That is an absolute guarantee that people who live with mental ill health or challenges in the workplace use toilets as a place of respite. So if you are ever interested in communicating mental health information, support, your EAP, for example, I often tell organisations, publish your most important work on the back of toilet doors, because that's where people go when they are upset, challenged, frightened, all of these things. And that's where they may pick up some really good tips on how to look after themselves or how to access support within your organisation for the things that they are feeling at that time. And also it's important to understand, and as I'm sure you do, that not all mental health challenges take place because of work, but what we can't do is often leave our lives at the door, which is, I've heard many in organisation, we've got to leave our personal life at home. Good luck if you can do that, and some people can, and I mean that with the greatest of respect, but not everybody can do that. Not everybody can separate those two things out. Blue roll tip, yeah, you're welcome, no problem. Back of toilet doors, and literally, if you've got an EAP, which is an employee assistance program, put how to access it on the back of doors and change it, change your communication, put some information up there. You often find them now like breast cancer stuff, or for men checking for testicular cancer in toilets and stuff. They really do hone in on putting information that's important on back of toilet doors. Thank you. So eating and drinking more, feeling overwhelmed by things. Yes, gosh, don't we all get to that point sometimes we're feeling completely overwhelmed. Tiredness and lack of energy, which I think the whole country, the whole world is probably feeling right about now, again, which is very normal. Finding it difficult to control your emotions can come across externally, if you're on the receiving end of that for somebody that doesn't behave that way, perhaps. In my organisation, as the chief exec, I find it quite difficult sometimes to be able to communicate how I'm feeling to my staff, because I do understand that there is a line there, but we are very open in our office. So if people see that, for example, for me, out of these ones, if it was ever going to be me, it would be talking less and avoiding social activities. If that happens to me, then my team often know there's something going on with me and they might need to check in, because I like talking. I'm quite good at it. And social activities, I'm, you know, a bit of a social butterfly. So lockdown for me was really, really, really hard. Whereas for some people, it was absolutely perfect. Again, it's that frame of reference, right? Being easily distracted, finding it hard to make decisions, and irritability and short temper. So being aware of yourself and being aware of those you work with or live with is a really, really important part of trying to understand what's going on for them or what's going on for yourself, and then figuring out what it is that we can do, because we can do things. There are things that we can do. Changing the way someone thinks or feels can also be a sign of stress. So mood swings, being withdrawn, loss of motivation, etc., and just a few more. And actually at work, where there might be challenges in terms of a behaviour, taking more time off work, arriving for work later, and being more twitchy and nervous. In today's society of Zoom, it could be turning off cameras, not getting involved in chat, not doing anything like that. So again, we're trying to pick up new ways of communicating in this new world that we live in. What can we do to support ourselves and others? If you're all here for work, because I can see, yes, you are all for work, ask yourself a few things in terms of your mental health provision at work. Review your current provision honestly. We know some of those statistics are saying, well, I feel it's my responsibility, but only 13% of them have had training. Well, what does that look like? Do your staff feel the same way you do if you're a business owner or a decision maker in terms of what you're doing and what they're receiving? So we work an awful lot with local authorities with some big local authorities with different departments, you know, and some of those staff, depending upon their manager, feel really supported, but some don't feel very supported. There's no that standardization. So having a buy-in from each department lead is very important to have everybody having that conversation. Identifying a training requirement. So what does training look like? And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mental health first aid in a second, just because it's on my slide, because I did one for introduction of mental health first aid and it's on there and I'm not taking off. So we can have a look at that and what that might look like. Awareness is key for every single person. It is useless having 5 people within your company know about mental health or having mental health conversations and it doesn't include anybody else. It's just pointless. So there has to be an awareness piece for everyone. And that could be, like I said before, communicating of policies and procedures. It could be communicating of videos or, you know, mental health awareness weeks and stuff. I do love them because I think we can start having conversations about them, but they can sometimes be a bit draining just doing work around that one week or that one day. Awareness for every employee. Outsource and seek advice. So do you have a strategy? When I often ask organisations about mental health strategies, they're like, what? What do you mean a mental health strategy? So, well, you have a health and safety one, you've got a fire one, you have to have first aiders at work because it's the law. So what does your strategy look like? How do your mental health first aiders work within your company? Do you have a suicide policy, for example? If somebody at work takes their life, what do we do as staff members? What is our pathway? Because that has happened over the past year. We've had to support organisations with people that they've lost within the workplace. The rest of the staff have been completely traumatized. What do we do about this? And having these conversations are really, really important for that. And finally, secure buy-in from the communications department and embark on a program all year round. This should be as frequent as doing your fire alarm testing, as far as I'm concerned, from a health and safety company, all right? Doing that work throughout the year is key. On mental health first aiders courses, we often talk about language, how we talk about mental health. We explore different frames of reference and intersectionality, stigma attached to mental health. We help people to understand what good mental health looks like, all right? So it's not all the bad stuff, but what does good mental health look like and how can we maintain that? Explore the factors, including the workplace, that can have impact on mental health. Look at how to support yourself and others with self-care, skills that are given to prevent mental ill health, how to intervene in a crisis. This is, for me, as a physical first aid training provider as well, the equivalent of understanding how to give somebody CPR in a cardiac arrest to how to speak to somebody who is contemplating suicide. Those two things being the crisis and the emergency. How do we deal with that? And as organisations, we only ever look at one of them, and that's the CPR. I deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So what about the other conversation that kills 5,000 people plus a year? Teach how to intervene, promote active listening, which is key to understanding. Yes. So thank you, Karina. So it's important, I think, to look at the organisation's culture and values. Yes, perhaps they need to be revisited because of the effects of the pandemic. I would say, not say perhaps, Karina, I would say categorically they have to. And an awful lot of work is being done from our point of view. We've been asked to go in and deliver an awful lot of work around back to work, how to get our staff back to work, how to take into consideration the anxieties, the losses, the bereavements, the change in their mental health as a result of being off work. How can we have these conversations rather than just to write everyone back to work? And I'm being very flippant because I don't believe that is happening at all. But having that understanding and that process to follow as to what that might look like is also key. Thank you, Karina, for really important. And teaching about diagnosable mental health challenges, what unwell looks like and how to spot these signs in yourself and others. A key part of this training is also finders, not fixers. That's my motto. We are finders, we are not fixers. It's not our job to fix people or to give people therapy or psychology. That's not our job. Our job is to understand what somebody's going through because we can see it, and to give them options for support, help and signposting. That is the role, as far as I'm concerned, of a really, really, really good mental health first aid function within an organisation. It's definitely not sitting down and running clinics, which is what I've heard other organisations say, oh, but those mental health first aiders, they actually qualify to run clinics. Well, no, they're not. Don't make them do that. That's awful. So understanding what this process looks like within a company is really, really key. And finally, the 5 ways to well-being, which you probably all heard of. And I know that it might sound a bit wishy-washy. I do. The 5 ways to well-being, oh yeah, we all talk about it. But you know what? Like, as a human being, this is the stuff that I can have control over without an intervention. This is the stuff that I can do. I can give. What can you give? You can give your time. You can give your knowledge. You can give space to people. Being active, what does your organisation do about being active? Where do you take your meetings? Are they over a desk, or do you walk? A lot of people doing walking meetings these days, which is a fantastic idea. So, you know, can you get up and do some walking? Can you embed this stuff into your culture? As Karina said about how we can embark on a new way of living now, we've got a fantastic opportunity to rethink and to reevaluate what our working lives look like now. And I really hope that we don't go straight back in to what it was before. Excuse me, because I don't know about you, but it was always kind of up here in terms of attainment, right? Push, numbers, data. And I appreciate in a certain way that needs to be done, but gosh, get a bit of a break from that. Keep on learning. We have a book library in here in the office. I can't show it to you because it's over there. I can move my camera, but I can see lots of books over there, including menopause. We talk a lot about menopause in my office, full of women. And so it's important we have these conversations and understanding. We've also got some stuff over there about purpose and feel your fear and do it anyway. I've got all sorts of books over there, but we'll also, you know, whatever you're reading, bring in and we'll swap and have a conversation about that, because I built a culture here of having that downtime to humanize my staff, to talk to them about their weekends and what's going on, and inviting them to do so, not forcing that open, you know, we're not like that kind of commune space, but it is about having an open dialogue about normality within the company for my staff. Taking notice, being mindful of the things that we're doing, and connection. I think actually leaving it on that last point in terms of connection, something that we all lost so much through the pandemic, which is going to take a while for us to rebuild. But what does it have to rebuild to look like? And that's key for us in terms of understanding what connection means to us and how we can go about pushing for more of that on our agenda, because as human beings, it's one of the most important things that we could all do with one another. So 40 minutes, whew, that was quick. I think I actually breathed there. And I do believe the last thing to say is just thank you so much for listening. I know we covered quite a lot in 40 minutes, but it's just a little bit of a tip about the conversations we should be having in 2021. And yeah, I think that's probably about it.
Thanks, Danielle. That was brilliant. I think I appreciate you've had to fly through stuff, but it's really good just to have that holistic, overall conversation about all different areas. And yeah, so if you haven't got any particular questions or scenarios at your work you wanted to talk to Danielle about.
Yeah, we've got 20 minutes.
Oh, I've got one question. I'll start off, if you like, while people are thinking.
Yeah.
What about, I've noticed with friends and kind of people I work with, of the whole connecting with people after the pandemic. And it's really hard trying to judge how people, if they feel ready, they want to like meet up or even just replying to messages. You don't want to feel like you're bombarding someone, but then equally you don't want them to feel like because they haven't replied, you're going to ignore them. That kind of scenario I've noticed a lot. I think everyone's just a bit sort of fatigued or not sure who makes the first move or
Do you know what? It's such a lovely question. I think we were literally talking about this in the office this morning. It's going to look completely different for every single person. And you're not going to know unless you ask them. I mean, I've been asked so many times by so many people for lots of dates, for like, oh, come on, let's go out. We can go out now. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just not in that space yet. And this is from a social butterfly, by the way. But I'm still quite anxious about what it looks like out there. I'm still quite concerned about other people and, catching the virus still. Do you know what I mean? So if I'm thinking like that, I'm also appreciative of other people might be thinking like that. So I think the best thing to do in that situation is just be honest, just ask them, how are you doing? Because this is how I'm at the moment. So I know that we normally meet up, but how are you feeling about it? Ask those questions, and people are genuinely or generally quite honest about it.
yeah, that sounds good. I just noticed, that kind of, it's just navigating at the moment, isn't it? Of you want to meet up with people and suggest things, but you don't want to put pressure on them, and that's the same at work, isn't it? I suppose the same thing of getting people back into the offices is what we're hearing, and are people ready and having that conversation.
Yeah, but you're right. It's just having that conversation, though. I think after the year we've had, demanding that people just come back to work because that's the best place for them to be, it would be the wrong thing to do, because there are going to be people out there who have lost people. There's going to be people out there who have given birth in a pandemic. There's people out there who have had these real life experiences in the middle of something we've never been through before. And I think we need to stop and take stock of that and what the impact of that is going to have been on people, because it's going to be different. I remember doing a COVID workshop that we deliver for mental health, and we did it for free because we had a lot of people. It was kind of the only way we could ever give something back. And people that came on those courses were just saying, I lost people. I can't get back into that again. I don't want to get back into that space. I'm still scared. And then you'd have some people that were saying, oh yeah, but we're all in the same kind of boat. And we'd have to say, we are all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. We cannot put that on other people, because I've got lots of rooms in my house. I've got a garden. I've got enough money. My husband's working, both kept our jobs, right? So that's brilliant. But I know people who have lost their jobs, lost their husbands. They've lost a lot. How can I turn around to them and go, well, yeah, we're all in the same boat? We're not, So people have been affected by this in the most profound of ways, which is going to show itself, I believe, in years to come. We haven't got the whole picture right now. So we've just got to be empathetic and take our time to have these conversations and to be open with this dialogue, for me.
That's very true. very true. Any other questions or discussion points, anyone?
I did have a question written down that said somebody was asking about dealing with ongoing anxiety of high volume workload. How can you switch off in the evening? And I give people something called happiness homework on my training. And it's simple, very, very simple, but it requires you to draw onto the very essence of yourself and to find things that make your soul sing, literally. So when we were younger, and I've got 2 kids and my children do extracurricular activity. My daughter plays piano, you know, my son plays football, they play computer games. They do these things that make their soul sing, right? Kids do that naturally. I think as you become adults, you leave everything there and you do the adulty things. Going back to that very essence of yourself and finding the time to do things that make you feel really good is key. So the answer to that question is, how can you switch off in the evening? Find something that makes your soul sing and do it. All right. I mean, literally, I've had people on courses that have come back to me after Happiness Hour and they've said to me, Danielle, for the past 4 years, my piano in the hallway, I remember, I'll never forget it, my piano in the hallway was covered with the kids' junk. It was covered. And my happiness hour, I walked in, I was like, what am I going to do for my happiness hour? And my eye caught the piano. She said it was like one of those films. She just did that with all of the stuff on her piano. And she sat down with a glass of red wine and she played for an hour. And she said, and when she came back, she said, I cannot believe how wonderful that was for me. I just played for an hour and it was like riding a bike. It all came back. And I said, you're going to do it again? She's like, yeah, I really am. Do that. You know, find something, find the thing that used to make you happy and do more. And we've all got the capacity to do that. I just think it takes time to kind of reconnect with ourselves and to understand that we've all got that in us, all of us, but it's been pushed away somewhere. We're in busy life, right? Find it, root out for it and make it a priority for yourself. And self-care, that's the ultimate self-care for me.
That's excellent advice. I really like that.
Yeah, what are you going to do though? I'm going to be curious now to find out what it is your happiness hour.
I enjoy it. Well, I miss gardening, but I've got a very small garden and the children just trash it. You know, sometimes I grow something, it gets destroyed by a football. So I'm kind of waiting till they're a little bit older. But I think certainly like cooking, like baking or that sort of thing, I lose myself in that. And I should really do that rather than the scroll of doom on my phone in the evenings.
Yeah, the scroll of doom. Oh,
it's just a bad habit, really bad habit.
The thing is as well, we all say, I haven't got enough time. Yeah, you have got enough time to go on Instagram 400 times. You know, let's see what we can do. And that goes back to the 5 ways to well-being, right? You know, connect, learn, you know, constantly learn, keep active, all of those good things.
Yeah, baking did it for me as well, if I may join the conversation, ladies. Yes. Jane and Danielle, I was also going to ask if it'd be all right to maybe just say that if there's any social enterprises in Hertfordshire, that they can access a bit of free support from the Hertfordshire Growth Hub as well. Kind of that time, that space maybe to talk or think about you know, a well-being strategy for their organization, or how to listen to their staff, maybe rethink their values. So we're kind of here to help them with that, and then signpost also to other kind of organizations that can help within Hertfordshire to help everybody kind of get better again, really, I guess, and be more productive and happier. And Danielle, I thought that was really good what you said. We're not all in the same boat. We are definitely in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And sometimes it's about finding out again who is in the same boat, or getting people, fishing them back out and getting them on board, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I think, you know, when we were looking at all of the, talking about cooking, I watched the Great British Menu. I love the Great British Menu. And that was all around kind of how people accessed the food industry in the pandemic. And, you know, restaurants doing some brilliant work in their community. to try and help feed kids or feed people who were found themselves without any money, you know, or lost their jobs and stuff. And it is around understanding that not everybody has the privilege that some people do, and how we can utilize our skills to be able to support people. So, you know, doing what you do there is prime example, right, of just supporting people in a position of business, to be able to come in and help them to grow and help them to do the work that they need to do. Because as we know, all social enterprises are designed for the greater good. And so we're all in the same boat, right? We're all in the same boat. And that's a great thing, because that way we're helping one another to be able to help those that are less fortunate than ourselves. So yeah, bang on there. Thank you, Karina.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks, Karina. Any other questions from anyone before we go? I think Danielle, before we do finish off, you must do a plug for your courses, explain to people the different types of courses you do and how far you travel and what you do online. So if you want to say a few words.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so we are a UK-based organisation. We deliver physical and mental health first aid training specifically, but we also do CPD accredited training, mental health awareness, children and adult sector. So we do an awful lot around the mental health space. I do an awful lot of webinars and talks. I've done a number of seminars and yes, speaking opportunities within organisations across the UK. So yeah, we've got a number of trainers that work for us that are all over. We've got maximum coverage, but we also do an awful lot of work like this now. We work with other organisations to help with strategy as well for mental health, because I think it's quite important. And as standard, we always do our physical first aid training, which you have to have by law. So as a social enterprise, we always say, guys, you got to do it anyway, you know, come and do it with us and we'll deliver it out with the money you give us. So yeah, we are a modern day Robin Hood. Although we don't steal, we just ask for the money. Thank you, Jane.
That's all right. Any other questions from anyone before we wrap up?
I think we could.
No, I'm what I do is when I send round the links to the slides and things and recording, I'll give Danielle's details. So if you ever want to get in touch with Danielle afterwards or inquire about training, you can do. So thank you, Danielle, so much. That was really, really good. A great stepping point, I think, for all of us to go on and do more with. And I just want to, one last thing I wanted to mention is for Social Enterprises of England, we are looking for directors on our board, and we're particularly looking for social enterprise owners, founders. So if anyone's interested, then please get in touch with me, because we're actively recruiting some more directors at the moment. So that's my little plug. But thank you. And we've still got places on the rest of our webinars this week. We've got another 6 webinars this week covering all sorts of topics, including diversity, marketing, working from home and adapting your business, business growth. Yeah, a whole mixture of different things. So have a look on our website if you want to join another webinar this week. Thank you, everyone. And huge thank you, Danielle.
No problem. Take care. Thank you. It's lovely to meet you all.
Thanks, everyone.